So I'm not necessarily saying that this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it is something. And we will talk about things more and more as the off-season continues, because literally, there isn't really anything else to talk about. Let's dive into the Vancouver Canucks and get into a question that was posted about on the R Canucks subreddit. It talks about Elias Pettersson. It talks about Jake DeBrusk. It talks about the idea of Vancouver making more trades, but it also talks about the idea of the Canucks just totally passing on that idea. Here's a post made by Nincross on the R Canucks sub from yesterday. The likelihood of moves being made before September. I would bet a lot of money that the Vancouver Canucks are not going to be making any moves from now until puck drop. DeBrusk isn't getting moved. Neither is Elias Pettersson. Are you fine with this, or do you still believe either player is gone by game 1? Now, if we're hedging bets here, I don't like to gamble my life savings away, but if I were a betting man and I was to go out there onto the futures watch of some sort of a website, would I say Jake DeBrusk is traded by the time the season begins? I would probably lean yes. Elias Pettersson? Probably leaning no. Mostly because it just seems so difficult to make a trade with Elias Pettersson actually go through and find a team that's willing to take him on at the price that Vancouver is willing to sell him at. $11.6 million a year isn't that bad anymore in the grand scheme of things. And if Elias Pettersson can consistently be a first-line center, maybe not even necessarily a player of a first-line center caliber magnitude on the ice, but as long as he can play 20-21 minutes a night and technically be the team's first-line center, regardless of the points, $11.6 million ain't that bad when you consider how strong he is defensively and just the steps he has taken to really mature as an NHL veteran. EP40 is definitely going to go for something if he does go, but it's going to take the right team, and I don't think every team in the NHL has a super positive view on Petey, even if they're believing that they could revitalize what it is that he once was and they could bring out the best in him. Maybe Kyle Dubas calls and says, hey, let's reunite him with Andrei Kuzmenko. Let's get that done. And Pettersson can potentially be the player that he was once upon a time. Another 100-point season to come? It might actually be funny if Pittsburgh gets it done, though, because I'm thinking like, hey, that Marcus Naslund trade from 30 years ago was so lopsided for Pittsburgh. If Pettersson gets traded for some prospect that doesn't pan out and Pettersson ends up becoming a 100-point player, maybe that could be Pittsburgh's revenge for all those Marcus Naslund memories. Either way, Jake DeBrusk is a guy that I don't necessarily see sticking around. I think he is too valuable of a power play scoring profile to go untouched. I'm sure there would be at least 2 or 3 teams that are desperate enough to add on scoring before the season begins to bite on what Vancouver supposedly wants for Jake DeBrusk. Also, when you look at the dollar amounts of other wingers in the NHL, $5.5 million seems like a pretty big deal. Honestly speaking, you talk about Alex Tuch, you talk about Kyle Connor, Adrian Kempe, a lot of these guys got paid, and 8 digits is the new $7.5 million, it seems like. Jake DeBrusk is still reasonably under that at 5.5, and his dollar amount, I'd say, pretty reasonable when you're thinking about it in the long term. So with that said, I mean, Jake DeBrusk, I think he has too good of a profile to pass up if you're another NHL team. Let's go out there and read the comments on this R Canucks post, asking whether or not both of these guys could stick around. DeBrusk will likely get moved in the preseason. Okay, S. McFarlane agrees here. Dog days right now for another few weeks, and then it'll pick up at the beginning of September. Subban's Big Blackhawk says, I think we need to trade one more forward, be it DeBrusk, Drew O'Connor, or Elias Pettersson. Given the Canucks have first waiver priority, they'll have their pick of reclamation projects when teams do their final cuts, so it would be good to try and clear up a forward roster spot for one. That's a really good comment, Subban's Big Blackhawk. Talking about Vancouver taking advantage of the inevitable waiver wire options that will be available once the season begins. Guys that probably have a lot of potential but just don't have that sticking power, getting sent down to the AHL, NHL teams feeling like they could squeak them by in waivers at the beginning of the season because all these other teams have their teams figured out and they don't have any room. If Vancouver trades away a DeBrusk or an O'Connor or somebody, or maybe even both, they could genuinely start out the season with some guys that they just pick up on waivers and bring into the organization out of nowhere. This is how the Vancouver Canucks were able to squeak Jacob Markstrom into the Utica Comets AHL system all those years ago. They waited until like the last possible day during the end of the preseason, start of the regular season era, sent him down on waivers, and he went unclaimed. It's why Jacob Markstrom, who inevitably became a Calder Cup finalist goaltender, was down there in the AHL, despite the fact that he did have an NHL sample and he went on to becoming a Vezina candidate to be. That's a really interesting idea. I didn't think about that. I like that a lot, actually. Subban's Big Blackhawk. And yeah, I am purposefully going out there and repeating their name because it's pretty funny. Another reply says, I wouldn't be surprised if there's one, maybe two moves before the regular season. DeBrusk is probably the most likely there. Saltaire Brew says, I think pretty low likelihood based on several factors. I think it's so close to training camp at this point, most teams are pretty set up to see how their teams will look at training camp and to begin the year. Not a lot of point in dropping a bunch of assets now to acquire one of the Canucks players. Teams know if they haven't been traded yet, it's likely the market is asking for a lower trade price than what the Canucks are selling for. The Canucks have no vested interest in lowering their prices for many reasons, most of all being they can afford to hold on to players they want to trade, as the Canucks do not need cap space in hopes teams will feel pressure and make a riskier move later. Or the players improve their game this season, increasing their value. As a result, Canucks don't have any pressure to sell right away on these players. So, yeah, there you go, eh? I'd say that's pretty fair as well. Not saying that it necessarily undermines the idea of a trade coming or not coming, but I do think it does make sense if the Vancouver Canucks just decide to pass up on any of the packages that they're being offered. They could just wait a little bit. I mean, Jake DeBrusk, he kind of has that same Dylan Larkin thing going on. DeBrusk is signed on till 2032. These long-term, this Jake DeBrusk is. So unless he genuinely expresses that he wants to leave Vancouver, which it doesn't seem like he has, but we all kind of understand that that's probably how he's feeling underneath, there isn't really a reason for Jake DeBrusk to go out there and force his hand in a trade at this point. We'll just wait and see whether or not a team actually is willing to take him on. And then finally at the end, another reply says, it would be nice if the Canucks could make a trade, but Lekaramaki, Ogren, Coots, Villander, Buyam, and EP25 are all on two-way contracts, so it's not really necessary. With really no premium assets to shop, I don't think it makes sense to lower prices on what the Canucks do have. So with all that said, you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Guys like Elias Pettersson, Drew O'Connor, and or Jake DeBrusk, what are the chances that one or none of these guys get traded before the start of the regular season? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.